We're finally going to be talking about appraisals. Now, this is a large chapter in the exam. They have a lot of questions for you, and they will be testing you on all of this information. So the first very common question that most of you guys will have in the exam, they will test you and they will ask you a question about the factors that affect the property value. So what are the things that will affect the property value? Why do we have to do appraisals for? And why can't we just look at one house and say, hey, this one just sold for $500,000. This one should be worth the same. Why can we do that? The first reason for that, because all properties are unique. So that means none of them are exactly the same. Yes, maybe they are cookie cutter houses and they're right next to each other, but they might have different views, different finishing. There's other things that might, make them look different. So properties are unique. And that is the reason why we always have to do an appraisal on every single property, right? They are heterogeneous. Look at that elephant. Does he look like any other elephants? No, he's different. And heterogeneous means not alike, not the same. You don't need to know this definition, but basically it says heterogeneity of property. It says that if you appraise one property, you cannot take that information and use it for the other property. Right? It's just not usable. Properties are not the same. They're all different. Watch how they phrase it. Right? So if they say heterogeneity or heterogeneous, then that's good. But if I say homogeneous, then that becomes a false statement because it means alike. It means the same. Right? So that is a false statement. That is a true statement. So watch how they state it for you. So the second factor that affects the property value, it says that real estate has low turnover. Now, what does that mean? So if I know the market will be crashing, and I said to myself, okay, I'll sell the property right now. Before it crashes, I want to sell it. Do you think that will happen? I mean, if I sell it for $1, I'm sure I'll sell it fast. But if I want to get a good price, it's probably going to take its time before it sells, right? So usually real estate takes its time before it sells. But if I have some cryptocurrency right now, or if I have some stocks, and I know the market is crashing, can I sell them now? Yes, I can. Right? So you can sell it, you can buy it quickly when it comes to stocks, when it comes to crypto, but when it comes to houses, it usually takes a low turnover. It takes some time before you can sell it. And because of the low turnover, it causes the low limited data sources. So that means it's harder to collect the data when something sells slower. When it comes to stocks, it's easy to collect the data. But when it comes to houses, it's harder to collect all the data you need, right? Because it takes the time before it sells, before you can buy something. Okay, this question is not a question, but I just want to ask you. So the flow of information concerning the real property is limited and difficult to collect because of what? So the information about the real estate is limited and difficult to collect. Is that because of, look at option one, every parcel of real estate property is homogeneous? First of all, is that true or false? It's false because it should be heterogeneous, right? So homo means alike, heter means not alike, okay? So just because of that is already false, but is that because the property is unique? That's why it's hard to collect the information? Or is it because of the low turnover? Well, which one is the harder to collect information for? Because of the low turnover, right? So that's why it's hard to collect it because it takes time before it sells. Okay. The third factor that affects the property value is its durability and long lasting. Now, what does that mean? It's durable and it lasts for a long time. So when you build your real estate, hopefully it will last you for some time. But on exams, they want to talk more about the life of the building itself. And it says, if you planning to buy a property, and let's say one house is an older house, but it's in a nice location, and it's a prime location. And then the other house is a brand new house, but it's in a crappy location. Which one has a better value to this? Just because one house physically younger, right, build just right now, like it's brand new build, and the other house is older house, so physically not as good, but economic life, which one is the better one? So an example, talk about the life of the building. It says, what's more important to you? The life of the building depends more on the economic life than the physical life. So out of those two houses, I will go towards the old house, right, towards the economic life of the location itself, because that's better to me. It will probably survive there for longer because it's a better location for the house. But maybe the other house, not in its best location, right? So for that reason, maybe there's a better use for that property. Maybe I should put some commercial building, or maybe I should put strata building. Who knows what that is, right? So basically focus on the economic life of the building, not as much as the physical life. Doesn't matter how old, how new, how much money that property is going to give you in value at the end, right? That's what we're looking for. Okay, it is highly local and it's immobile. Now, what does that stand for? Highly local, immobile. So when it comes to real estate, hey, this says, you know what, I love my house, but I hate the location. I want to take it and I want to move it somewhere else. You don't have a mobile house. If your house is attached to the land, which most houses are, right, then you can just take it and move it. It's immobile, it's attached to the land. So for the example, if they're referring to immobility, then yes, it is. It's immobile. It's not physically manageable to take it and move it somewhere else, right? It's attached to the land. So my question is, because it's the house attached to the land, all the things around the property, so if you have a beautiful lake front, or if you have a beautiful park next to you, if you have schools and hospitals, if you have factory next to you, all those things that you have around yourself, which we call externalities, would they affect the property value, yes or no? I hope you said yes, because yes, if you have a park, is the property value will increase because of that? Sure. If you have a golf course, yeah, that's a positive externality. If you have schools next to you, you might not like it, but for the exams, the schools, okay, the hospitals, parks, golf courses, all of those ones are the positive externalities. They will bring the value to your property, right? So people with kids or older people, they might like those things, okay? And then what are the negative things? Negative could be anything. It could be that you have that, what do we have in there? We have a bus stop right next to your door. You know what I mean? That could be not the best thing because it's maybe loud or maybe noisy, right? So it depends. If you have a factory next to you, if you have, I don't know what else, something negative, right? Or let's say prison next to you, right? That's probably a negative externality. But those things, why are they affecting your property value? Because your house is what? It's not because it's unique, and it's not because of low turnover, it's not because it's durable, but because it is Immobile. Good. So for the example, if I refer to immobility, then you're looking for the answers to do something with externalities. If you're talking about the externalities and say why all of those externalities affecting the property value, then you say it's because of the immobility. You get a point, right? So those two, they come together as a combo, right? That's kind of what I want you to think. Okay, question 1. Which of the following statements regarding the immobility and the durability of land is false? Right? So now they mix and match the durability and immobility here. They're asking for the false statements in here. Okay, the physical durability of real property means that it has value as an investment and as a source of a shelter, right? Okay, if you're not really sure about this one, go for the next one. When considering durability of structure, it is not important to distinguish between the economic life and the physical life of the building. Okay, so which one more towards the durability? Which one sounds like definitely a false statement? When considering durability of structure, it is not important to distinguish between the economic life and the physical life. Now, that's definitely a false statement because it is important for you to know how the property will be affected by those values, right? So that becomes a true statement. So we talked about the immobility and we talked about the externalities. Just make sure that you understand how they affect each other. Question 2, the real property is affected by external influences from neighborhood properties. Which characteristics of real estate causes this? So if they talk about externalities in the question, you see how they're asking you for? What are they looking for? Are they looking for that uniqueness? Are they looking for low turnover? What are they looking for? They're looking for immobility. So all of those parks and hospitals and all the things next to you affecting your property, it's because it's what? Because of its immobility. Everything else doesn't really matter, but this is what matters when it comes to the externalities. Keep it simple. Question 3, which of the following factors will not affect the value of the land? Okay, so does the immobility affect the value of the land? The house is immobile, of course it will affect the property value. Okay, externalities, would that affect your property value? All those parks, hospitals, schools, prisons, golf courses, yes, they will. Okay, how about development of surrounding areas? So if, let's say you have a house in here and then suddenly start redeveloping your property and they put a mall right next to you, would that affect your property value? Of course it will. But look at option number 4 and tell me why option number 4, why the owner's personal financial situation is not something that will be affecting the property value. Why not? Is this owner attached to the land? Or is he movable? Is how you have to think. So if something is movable and is not attached to the land, then his financial situation, so if he's in, I don't know, financial crisis and he has no money in the bank account, that's not affecting the property value itself, right? That's his personal thing, and he's movable. He probably will sell the property, right? But people not attached. For that reason, anything to do with you, it has nothing to do with the land value. Question 4, which of the following externalities, which would represent the best example of an externality that is both positive and negative? So now they're looking for that externality that could be positive and it could be negative. Parks, it's only positive. Okay, pollution, oh, that's probably only negative. I don't think anybody will say, I want to be my property to be polluted. Okay, proximity to the transportation facility and the golf course. It's funny, they changed a couple of things in exams, but now it makes more sense. Option 3, hopefully that's the one you choose because proximity to transportation could be positive, could be negative. Why? Because it's nice to be right next to transportation, but what's negative about it? It could be noisy, right? It could be a lot of, I don't know, pollution and stuff like this, who knows? So that's why it could be positive and it could be negative. All the other ones, parks and golf courses are positive, pollution is definitely negative. Question 5, the real estate values are influenced by externalities. Which of the following below could be used to determine this principle? So what are they looking for in the question? They say values are influenced by the externalities, okay? So which of the following could be used to determine this principle? Okay, so now you have 3 different things in here, and one of them says all of the above. So you kind of have to figure out what will affect, what will be an externality. Okay, I want to make it simple for you. Out of those 3 things, what is an externality and what is not an externality? Okay, markets suffer a significant drop in world oil prices, and because of this, the supply of the vacant office spaces increases in the city. Okay, you have to think about this one and say, okay, is that an externality? The world oil prices are increasing. Okay, is that physically right next to my property? Is that physically right next to whatever they're looking for? Okay, option 2, it's been announced that a small residential area has been rezoned for the shopping center and the value of the houses in the residential area will increase. So now you know you have a house and now they build the shopping center right next to you. Would that affect your property value? Definitely will. That's definitely an externality. Shopping center next to your house. I used to live in Tsawwassen, and down there, yes, they built a mall for us, and because of that, the prices went up. Even though nobody goes to that mall, but nobody cares, but the prices went up twice, right? So it is an externality because it's physically right next to you. So option 2 for sure. Option 1, I'll put it on the question mark. Option 3, because of the unemployment, the real estate prices decline. Now, is unemployment can affect real estate property prices? Yeah, of course. If there's no jobs and people cannot afford things, it will affect. But is that an externality? Is that physically right next to you? Do you see the difference? So when they refer to the externality, it's something that is physically right next to you. Just because there's problems in the world, or just because we have unemployment and there's no jobs, those things will also affect things, but it's not an externality. An externality physically right next to you. For that reason, you would choose only option number 2, the mall. Question 6, a friend of yours has introduced you and wants to know why is the bank that may finance his purchase of a house requires an appraisal. He claims that since the appraisal is not required for investment in stocks, an appraisal should not be required for the investment in real property. Okay? He's like, why should they do appraisal on the real estate? Nobody asked me for stocks before, and I did my investments in there. So you kind of have to go through the best options, through all of the options to find the best one, right? So you have to see what kind of reasoning you would give them as the answer. right? So use the method of elimination, and then we'll get to the point that they always want to hear from you in the exam. That answer comes up on pretty much all of the exams. They might rephrase this question, they might say a different story, but the answer is always the same. The question will be, why do we have to do appraisals? Okay. Option 1, the high turnover of the real estate relative to stocks means that only an expert can keep up with changing values. No, that's not it. Okay, the local nature of the real estate market implies that the flow of the information will be unlimited and easy to assemble. We know that there's not enough information in real estate because it's low turnover, right? So that's out, and it's not high turnover. So those two are out. So option 3 and option 4, it is difficult to find a real property that is very much alike. That's option number 3. And option 4, it says real estate purchase decisions are generally less significant than decisions regarding the individual share purchases. No, real estate is more significant than anything else because that's the high price items that we buy. So not option 3 or 4 for sure, but option 3 is what they're aiming for, and hopefully that's what you said too. It is difficult to find a property that is very much alike. What are they looking for? They're looking for that heterogeneous, and they're looking for that uniqueness, right? And that is the answer they always aiming for. It doesn't matter how they rephrase the question, right? So what does it all mean? That the complexity of the real estate as a product requires an investment of an expert appraiser. So basically, you have to do an appraisal for every single real estate property transaction, right? You have to, right? And properties are unique. We know that now. Okay, so who can do the appraisals then? Can you do appraisals? Can your grandma do appraisals? Apparently, if one day you wake up, or if your grandma wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I have nothing to do, I'm bored, I want to do appraisals, that's it, I'm gonna become an appraiser. So if your grandma tells you that, you say, sure, grandma, you can become one because anybody can become an appraiser. But do you think the bank will hire your grandma? Probably not, because you need to have some type of designation. The bank will ask, so what have you done before? You know, like, how do I know I can hire you, right? So in real life, they usually have quite a lot of things that it's a self-regarding professional association, requires educational programs, experience, but there's no licenses required, right? Nobody needs to have a license. If one day you want to wake up in the morning and says, you know what, that's it, I'm going to make money through the appraisals, put a tag in your chest, says, I do appraisals, put a tag in your doorbell, says, ring me up. I'll appraise your property for a fee, right? You can do that. There's no restrictions on that. So anyone may legally undertake appraisal work and charge a fee for the appraisal services. So you're allowed to charge the fees. But my question is, in real estate, do we charge fees? As real estate agents, when we do appraisal on somebody else's property, when we're trying to find the value of the property, how much we should list it for, do we charge them for that? No, because we know what will happen. If you charge somebody a fee, then you have so much more liability, right? And then they will come and sue you. And if you don't have the insurance, if you don't buy the insurance, then it's too much, right? You don't want to do that. You don't want to get into that things, right? So, and the courts and the judge, even if you have no license, okay, but if you've done appraisal, let's say you overvalued or undervalued the property, whatever that is you've done, the court may even look at that and say, you know what, we'll come after you. So basically, they can come after anybody, right? But mostly for people that charge money for the appraisals. Okay, so we have a formal appraisals and then we have informal appraisals. Formal appraisals is usually done for your lending institution. So if you want to get a mortgage, your lender will hire formal appraisers. Says, look, go do a job. You know, they'll sign a contract with that appraiser. They will tell them how much they will pay for that appraiser work, right? So they will pay them, right? And that's why we call them a former appraisals, because those appraisals usually get paid for what they do, right? Who will hire them? Mortgage finance, of course, if you want to lend your money. Expropriation, so if the government wants to come up to your property or do some restrictions on your land, right, they will have to do appraisal on that. Property tax assessments, if you don't want to charge your taxes, they will hire their own appraisals to do that. Insurance companies, executives under the estate, right? So all of those people, they will hire a formal appraiser, which makes sense. But if somebody wants to buy or sell property, usually when they want to sell a property, what do they do? They hire usually real estate agents, and they say, look, how much do you think my property is worth? And as real estate agents, we don't charge fees for that, right? There's no specific contracts to do that appraisal. We just do it informally as a part of the job, right? That's what we do, right? Usually real estate agents, anytime properties are bought or sold, that's when we do those type of appraisals, right? Now, we put here for you not strata council. So what does that mean? So on the exam, sometimes they'll give you all the list of different people who will be requiring appraisals, and then they will include the strata council. So the strata council needs to have an appraisal. Now, strata council, who's the strata council? Somebody who manages the strata building, right? So they manage in the building. Let's say it's you live in that strata building, there's like 20 units in there, right? That guy doesn't need an appraisal because he's not selling, right? He doesn't need to know the value of each of those units, right? So yeah, so not that one. Okay, so you need to understand the scope of work of the appraiser, right? So what is he responsible for? On what type of information he's going to be looking at, or which information he's going to ignore. So if the client hires that appraiser and says, look, I'm hiring you, can you find out how much the property is worth, okay? He will look at the client's intended use. So he's going to look at it as, okay, so what does he want to use this property for? So I'll use it towards my appraisal, right? I'll determine how much work it will take me to do this specific appraisal, right? On the exam, sometimes they'll ask you, as an appraiser report, is that important for them to include the date when they've done that appraisal? We'll say yes, because you have to know what has been done. If it's been done in 1960s, maybe that's not effective enough, right? And of course, sometimes limited detail may be still acceptable. So if the bank requests only a specific type of appraisal, so even if it's limited information, that could be enough. For the exam, is a very simple question. If he asks you what he's not allowed to do, he's not allowed to rely on the information of his client. So if you hire him and you pay him money and says, can you do an appraisal and find out how much this property is worth? He cannot value your opinions or your information, right? It doesn't matter if you hired him, but he is an expert. And because he's an expert, that's why you pay him money. You're not an expert in appraisals, right? So that's why he cannot rely on your information. He needs to come up with his own information. And that's how simple this is. Just know that, yes, even though the client pays him, he cannot rely on what the client wants or how much the client thinks the property is worth. He will come up with his own decision at the end, right? Okay, so this is a must for you to know. You have to know what are the reasons people hire the appraisals. Two major ones. And for the exam they will test you on this, I want to make sure that you have a clear picture the difference between the statutory reason and the market reason. Okay, simple. The statutory reason is government. Government wants to do an appraisal because he wants to tax you, or because he wants to expropriate your property. He wants to do change, like remove rights from you, or give you something, and he wants to do something to your land. Government is the statutory reason why we do appraisals. So if they ask you why the client does appraisals, if it's for the taxation purposes, then it's a statutory reason. Government wants this appraisal. Okay. For everybody else, whether it's buying, developing, selling, whatever that is, people do, that is a market reason, and that's why we're going to look at the market data and see, like we're going to look at the other property that recently sold, recently put on the market. So we're gonna do assessment. So market reason is for everybody else, for people who buy, sell, develop, right? So that's how simple that is. You have the question 7. An appraiser must understand why the client has requested the appraisal, right? If the purpose is for the property development. Now, is that government? No, it's not. Okay, this would be known as the job, marketing reason, because that's for everybody who develops, buys, and sells, right? Statutory reason, taxation, right? Anything to do with government. Let's talk about liabilities that appraisers have. Now, as you understand, whoever hires the appraiser, then they will have a contract between them and appraisers. It's usually the banks, right? So the bank says, look, I have to give a financing to somebody, so I will hire you and I will pay you a fee for your job, and please do a good job. And if the appraiser screws up and he overvalues or he undervalues the property, then the banks will come and sue him under the contract law and says, hey, you screwed up. We had a contract, you breached the contract, you've done a crappy job, so I'll come after you, right? So the appraiser will be responsible for the people that hire him, but the appraiser also going to be responsible for people who might rely on his appraisal, right? So like third parties, maybe the buyer who bought the property says, look, you screwed up. Now I'm affected by your appraisal too. So the tort law, that's in chapter 1, right? It's the civil law, it's the private law. It's the same words for tort, right? Private, civil, tort. It means that's the matter between the individuals only. Chapter 1, if you forgot, okay? So under the tort law, this is when the third parties can come and sue the appraiser for the negligence. Say, hey, you made a mistake, and now I am affected, so I still want to sue you, right? So we have 2 different types of laws that appraiser is liable for. This is not a question, but that's my way of testing you. I'm just going to give you a story. And it says Joanne hired, she wanted to buy a farm for $130,000, but she needs financing. So she comes to the ABC bank and she said, look, would you give me financing? And the bank says, okay, but before we give you financing, we're going to appraise the property, make sure it's actually worth $130,000. So they hired A and A appraisers to determine the value of the property, and the A appraised this property, appraised it for $135,000. So the bank says, okay, we hired the appraiser, and he said it's worth $135,000, so they lent her money, right? They lent her the money, and then 11 months later, the bank was forced for foreclosure on the property, and upon obtaining another appraiser, they found out the property is only worth $70,000. So the first appraiser screwed up. So he overvalued the property. And now they ask you, so it is found that A&A was negligent in the appraisal report. Who can sue who for the breach of the contract? Option 1 says, who can sue for breach of the contract? Who had a contract with the appraiser? The bank. So the bank will sue the appraiser, the A&A appraisers, under the contract law for the breach of the contract, right? So that will be the bank. And who can sue under the tort law? Now that would be Joanne. Why? Because she's a third party. She relied on that appraisal, right? And she definitely shouldn't pay $130,000 for that land if it's only worth $70,000. Okay, so legal responsibility of the appraiser. As we understand that he is liable to pretty much everyone, whoever he's doing the appraisal for and whoever might rely on the appraisal, so he has a legal liability. And we know that when he screws up, even if it's a negligent misrepresentation, he still might be responsible for overvalue, right? Or even undervalue. He's responsible for his information, basically, right? It says there is no set limit is a lovable error. So nobody tells you exactly how much the error should be in a general, right? Appraisal works. So it doesn't matter what type of houses he's dealing with. There's no set limit of allowable error, but the court have recognized that there is a reasonable error should be, right? And for them, they said that the reasonable margin of error for the normal houses. So what does that mean, normal? That means it's not unique. It's not like if there's one house in the middle of the woods and there's nothing to compare it to, then you cannot apply this kind of rule. But they say, we recognize that there should be a reasonable margin of error. And they say that reasonable margin of error for the normal type of houses, something that has something to compare it to, right, should be plus or minus 10%. So that means you can go higher by 10%, lower by 10%. And if you're within that 10% of margin of error, then you're okay. Nobody should be suing you, right? You should be okay with that, okay? But again, there's no set limit of allowable error in appraisal work in general, right? So in general, nobody can basically tell you, oh, it has to be below 10%, okay? This is kind of like what the court came up with. So remember, no license is required. Licenses are not a requirement, and it's not a legal responsibility for the appraisers you have. Question 8, which of the following statement is a false statement? Okay, let's look at all of them. The burden of proof is on the appraiser to explain an apparent overvaluation of the property. What are they saying? So they say that it is on the appraiser. That's his responsibility to explain why did he overvaluate the property. Is that true? Of course, that's kind of on him. Prove it. Why did you come up with this number? So option 1 is true. They're looking for full statement. Option 2, an appraiser may be responsible to any party who reasonably relies on the appraisal report for the purpose it was conducted. So even if it's a third party like Joanne, who was just getting a mortgage from the bank, but she relied on that appraisal, right? So for that reason, she can also sue him. So may be responsible to anybody who might rely. Option 3, firm reports often meet the needs of a financial institution, insurance companies, and government agencies. Now, I haven't explained this one yet, but let's look at option number 4 and let's see which one is definitely a false statement in here. An appraisal mistake of 3,000 out of 276,000 houses beyond the margin of allowable error. So 3,000 out of 276. If that sounds like a big number out of 276, how would we know? The reasonable margin of error is between 10%. Okay, so definitely it looks like it's a full statement. So if you do your math, you take 276 times it by 10%, it will come up to 27,600. That is the maximum margin of error allowable on the normal type of houses. Okay, so for that reason, option 4 is definitely a false statement. But what is this option 3? Form reports often meet the needs of the financial institution. So form reports is the basic, it's basically appraisers use specific forms for their appraisal work, and those forms will be met by all of those. There will be a standard form basically that they're going to fill up, and that form will be applicable to financial institutions, insurance companies, and there'll be other companies that use that specific form. Right? So that is a true statement, but that's what you're aiming for. That's what you're looking for that margin of the error. Question 9. An appraiser has estimated the market value of the property for $410,000. So if I was the appraiser who comes to appraise your house, I say, I think your house is worth 410. Okay? Am I responsible for that number now? Am I responsible? Yes, I am. Why? Because that's what I came up with. Okay? That's my decision or my estimate of your market value of the property. But the house is only sold for 370. So given that there was a sufficient evidence of recent sale, was the appraiser estimates of the value reasonable, right? So they're asking you, are you within that 10% margin of error? Like, are you reasonably mistaken in this case? So how do you do this? You have to do the math, right? You have to figure out, so if it's sold for less, then what do you do? Which number would you adjust? From where would you take the 10% off? From 370 or from 410? So if I was the appraiser and I come up with 410 saying that that's how much I think it's worth, that means I'm responsible for 410,000 number. So that's why you're going to take that 410, and if it's sold lower than my appraisal value, so lower than 410, then I will do minus the 10%. And I know that the lowest that the buyer should be selling it for, it will be 369,000, and it's sold for 370. So as an appraiser, I was like, this is good, I'm happy, right? Things off my shoulder, they should not be able to sue me because it's within the 10% of margin of error, right? But if it's sold for more than 410, I would do plus 10%, and 451 will be the highest basically, right? And 369 is the lowest margin of error. So right now, if you are in between those two numbers, then you are within the range and you're supposed to be safe, right, as an appraiser. Now the range method, now this is us coming up with this name. It's not an exam, nobody's going to ask you for this, but when Melanie writes hints and when she explains you things, she will refer to this method as a range method. Question number 9. So the answer is yes, it was within the maximum error allowed for the appraiser in the calculation of the market value of the residence. So that means you are within that margin of error and you will be safe. That's what they're trying to tell you. But what if the house sold for 368? What if it's sold for 368? Are you going to be within the margin of error then? Then you will be below the 10%, and that's when the answer will be completely different ones, right? So you will be opposite. It will be the option number 1. Okay. Question number 10. Consider that different appraisals as estimates are subject to some acceptable error. Which of the following is least likely to be considered as an acceptable error for an appraiser between several recent sales? So this is the question that a lot of people don't understand. First of all, just don't understand what they're asking for, right? They're looking at this mistakes. Yes, they can see it was appraised, and yes, it was sold, right? There's 4 different properties in here. There's 4 different examples, and you say, so I don't know what they want. Do they want the highest mistake or the lowest mistake? Okay? They say least likely to be acceptable. On exam, they will never look for the smallest mistake. They always want to see which one is the largest mistake that appraiser makes, right? So least likely to be acceptable, that means which one is not acceptable, which one is the high mistake in here. Okay? So you have 4 options in here, and you look at them and say, okay, so what do? Which one do I look at? How do I compare them? The easiest way, and I'm here to make your life easier. Honestly, I don't want to complicate things. We're not planning to become appraisers here. So for the exams, this is not a common question, which is a good thing. Okay? Not a common question, but it's a very easy one. So how I want you to work on this method, keep it simple. Okay? Some people can just look at it and says, okay, let's see which one has the biggest gap in between. And that's the one I would choose. A lot of people will look and says, I know what you chose, right? This one, it says from 462 for 410, that sounds like the biggest gap in there, right? But how do we actually make it accurate if you want to test yourself and check on this? What do? You take the appraisal price, which is the first number, divided by the sold price. That's all you do. You take the first appraisal divided by the sold, and you do it for every single of those answers, and you see how it comes up to 0.94, 1.126, 0.93, 1 point something, to see which one is the highest margin of error in here, right? And the highest one that comes up to is this, right? So for that reason, you would choose option number 2 as the least likely to be acceptable error. So that means the biggest mistake will be option number 2. It's the biggest gap in here. So we also have to know the difference between the ceiling price and the floor price. Okay? So ceiling and floor, ceiling and floor. So think of it visually. Floor, it's always below, and the ceiling is always higher than you have, right? So that's how you kind of have to think about it, like a house, right? You have a floor below, and then you have the ceiling on the top. So they say, what is the ceiling price? The ceiling price is the highest price to the buyer. So that means if the buyer wants to put an offer on the property, he has a limit, and he says, you know what? I only got approved up to So that up to will be his, that will be his ceiling price. And if he wants to put an offer, the offer is going to be higher or lower than the ceiling price. The price and the offers will be between the ceiling and the floor. So nothing goes higher than the ceiling, nothing goes below the floor. It always has to be in between those two, between the floor and the ceiling. So if he wants to put an offer, of course, he's not going to put an offer higher than the ceiling. He's going to put the lower that is lower than the ceiling, right? Because he is only approved up to specific numbers. So that means if he put in an offer, it will be lower than the ceiling, right? And it says the highest price to the buyer that he will pay equal or below the asking price, right? So it's going to be equal or below the asking price. The floor price is the highest, sorry, it's the lowest price to the seller. It says that's my bottom price. I will never take less than this. That is my lowest price. So if anybody wants to give me an offer, make sure that you give me an offer higher than my floor, right? So that's what that is, the lowest price to the seller that you will accept. Now, both of those, selling price and the floor price, we call them as subjective value. Subjective, that means they are changeable. There could be some possibilities in here, right? Subjective, that means it's not a sale price. It's not how much it was sold for. And as an appraiser, would you look at buyer's opinions or the seller's opinions, how much the property is worth? No, you don't look at that stuff. You look at the objective values, not the subjective values. Okay, so the sale price. So let's look at the example. So let's say the buyer said, my top price, my ceiling price will be $500,000. That's all I can pay, okay? And then the floor price, which the seller's lowest price, he says, I will never take less than $400,000. Do we have any gap in between the floor price and the ceiling price? Do we have any room for negotiation here? We actually do. We have $100,000 of negotiation room in here. So for that reason, can you have a sale in here? Yes, you can. How do you know if you can have a sale here? If your floor is lower than the ceiling price, that's all good. But if it's opposite, then that's going to be an issue, right? So if they negotiated and they came up with $425, that becomes an objective value. Why is it objective? That's how much they're going to sell it for, right? As an appraiser, we'll look at that numbers. Sell price must be at least equal or less than the ceiling value. So it should be always lower than the ceiling, right? And higher than the floor, right? If you just remember that, everything should be above the floor and higher than the ceiling, right? The deal could be made because the ceiling is above the floor. And that's why in this case, we have no issues in here. How about this? This is the second example. Now we have a ceiling price that is $400,000. So what does that mean? That means the buyer says, my top price that I can pay, that I can afford is $400,000, right? But then the seller, look what he said. My floor price is $500,000. I'll never take less than this. Do you think we can have a sale in here? Why not? Because your floor cannot be higher than your ceiling, okay? So that's why you cannot have any selling here, because there's nothing you can do. There's no room for negotiation here. So no sale can happen in here, right? Keep it simple. Question 11. Potential buyers aware of the asking price of the particular house listed for sale. Which of the following statement is normally false? So they're looking for the false statements, okay? The probable sale price will be equal or above the floor price. Sale price will be equal or above the floor. So anything that has to happen with the floor, it should be higher than the floor. So option 1 is good. How about option 2? The probable sale price will be equal or above the seller's value to the owner. Now, value to the owner, is that an objective or subjective value? That's what he wants. So that is not an objective value. As an appraiser, you're not going to look for something that somebody wants, okay? So we'll skip this one for now, okay? Option 3, the ceiling price will be equal or below the asking price. So the ceiling, okay, will be equal or below. So as long as it's below the ceiling, that's also a true statement. True statement, true statements. And the seller is likely to know the buyer's selling price. Do you think the seller is likely to know the buyer's selling price? Definitely not. So you see, if you're not really sure between the two options, you have to see which one is a better one. So how does the seller will know what the buyer's top price, right? Or what is his maximum? That's not possible. So for that reason, that's definitely false statements. And option 2 becomes a true statement. Probable sale price will be equal or above this. So basically, to be honest, this one just to throw you off. Just because the value to the owner is 1, they can give offers how they want it. It could be more, it could be less, it could be equal. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? But option 4, hopefully you got this. Why is it false? Okay. So subjective value, just to repeat myself, that's something that is not, it's not a number appraiser is going to look for, because it's not subjective. It's like, who knows? That's what they want, right? Value to the owner is subjective, right? What seller wants, what buyer wants. It's not important to us, and objective value is what we're looking for. So in the exam, a lot of times they'll ask you, what is the value in exchange? That's it. That's going to be the question. And the answer will be the sale price, because that is an objective value. Okay? On exam, they'll ask you what is an objective value, and the answer could be value in exchange, okay? Or it could be the sale price. So just know that whatever you sell it for, it becomes objective, right? And that's what we look for as an appraisers in order for us to do an appraisal work. Insurable value, that's also an objective value. Assessed value, so it's kind of like, it's the points that already been approved, basically, right, by an expert, and that's why they become objective values. So when it's sold, that becomes an objective value. Insurance, insurable value, that's objective value. Assessed value, market value, and the lending value. I'm going to explain what market value just in a minute, but the lending value, I just want you to know this definition now, and when you get to the math portion, they will ask you the same question again. They like to give you a written question like this one about the lending value. They'll ask you, what is this? So the lending value, it's a long-term conservative estimate of the value of the interest in the land pledged security. So in English, okay, when the lender wants to give you money, okay, it's a long-term conservative estimate. So it's his estimate, but what is he estimating? He estimated how much money he can lend you based on what? based on a security. So you see, a lender is not going to give you money just like that, just because you won them, right? They're not going to be giving you money based on the subjective value that says, we'll give it to you based off if we feel safe to give you money, right? So security will be the keyword here. Long-term conservative estimate, that's also going to be one of the keywords describing the lending value, right? So lending value, for example, if they ask you for definition, you're definitely looking for that security as a keyword in there. So market value, that's also an objective value. And we've been talking about this so many times. So now you have to actually know what is the definition of the market value. And on exam, they will ask you for this separately. They'll ask you market value is, and they will look for the answer. It is an estimate of what property is likely to sell for, right? So it is an estimate of what the property is likely to sell for in an arm's length transaction. Now, we're going to use this phrase quite often, arm's length transaction. When I talk to contracts, I was explaining your arm's length transaction. When it comes to your family, do you give them a handshake and says, hi, mom, nice seeing you? My mom would give me a slap if I do this to her, because in our family, we come nice and close, we give hugs, right? So an arm's length transaction, that means business transaction. And that's what we want to see. If I want to determine the market value, and if I sell the property to my mother, of course, I'm not going to sell it for more money, right? I'm probably going to sell for less than what it's worth, and that's not going to be a true market value. So you can't rely on that number. So if it was not done at the arm's length transaction, then you cannot rely on that information at all, right? That's not between the related parties, especially. No, that's not a market value, right? So market value is an estimate of what property is likely to sell for in an arm's length transaction between the buyer and the seller if the property is on the market for a reasonable period of time when the market conditions they've been unchanged. So when the market has been stable. Right? Arm's length transaction, right? Likely to sell for, that's a definition of the market value. Two elements to determine the market value, the right of the ownership. So if I was the appraiser and I'm looking at the market value, what it's likely to sell for, I'm going to look and see what type of ownership you have. Is that a fee simple or freehold, or is that a leasehold property? That's huge. If it's leasehold, it's not going to be worth as much as a freehold. So for that reason, it will determine the market value of your land. And the second thing I'm going to look for, of course, is the physical property characteristics, right? Basically, I'm going to look and see what is the location, how old is the house, and all the other things to determine the property value. Question 12. The market value of the property is best defined as what? Market value. Option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is a long-term conservative estimate of the value of the property pledged as a security for a loan if the property is on the market for a reasonable period of time when the market conditions are unchanged. So this part, where the property is on the market for a reasonable number of time when the market conditions have been unchanged, that's true. But look at the first part of it. It says a long-term conservative estimate of the property pledged as a security. What does that security stand for? That's your lending value definition. So option 1 for that reason is a false statement. But option number 2 says the estimate of what the property is likely to sell for, right, in arm's length transaction. So hopefully you have enough keyword in here just to determine that that becomes a market value definition. And this one, I would highlight keyword security in here. That will be a lending value definition. Good job. Question 13. Which of the following is a key determinant of the value of the property? So if I had to look at the property as an appraiser, what would I look for? To determine the market value of the property, what would I look for? Is that a financing, cash equivalent price, listing price, or the right of the ownership? You remember the two things I look for? I look for the ownership, and I look at the physical characteristics of the property. Okay, so right of the ownership is what they're aiming for. So this is going to be on pretty much all of the exams. I just love this question. For years, for 20 years, I've been teaching you guys. I see this all the time. Right? Our students coming back and always say same thing, right? This is the question. This is the question. And it says the subject of the appraisal is. A lot of times they'll give it to you as a story, like your friend coming to you and says, so how much do you think my property should be worth, right? Or they will ask you specifically the subject of appraisal is, okay? So how do you basically, in English, they're saying, what am I appraising? What am I looking at to appraise your property? What are the subjects I'm going to be looking at, right? And what I'm going to be looking at is all of the legal rights that vested in that particular piece of property, all of the legal rights that comes with this land. You remember we talked about the elements, the right of the ownership and the physical property characteristics? Same idea in here. So I'm looking for all of the legal rights that comes with the property, right? Legal rights, highlight that. That will be the answer for you. So if they ask you for the subject of the appraisal, you're looking for the keyword of legal rights, okay? So highlight that. So what kind of legal rights are they referring to? So if you have a property, look at that house, look at that, okay? I want you to look at that. You see the old property right here, okay? And you see how this property had an airspace on top of it? Guess what they've done? Whoever bought the property next to it, they say, can we buy your airspace on top of it? Because it's worth money. Can we buy it and we build it on top of your house? Right? That's what they've done. So the airspace is worth money. That is a legal right to you, right? We're starting to see more of that in British Columbia, but there's a lot in Ontario, lots in Japan. Japan is full of airspace rights that they're selling in there. Fee simple ownership, so we're looking for that, right? Rights of ownership in here. Is that a leasehold, right? What type of interest do you have in the land in there? Condominiums, ownership, and easements, right? That's you. So if all different rights that comes with the land, that's what the subject of the appraisal is going to be based on, and that's what I'm looking for. Legal rights. Hopefully I brainwashed you enough on that. Question 14, which of the following might be the subject of the real property appraisal? So what can we use as an appraisal? Airspace could be one, right? Life insurance policy, a diamond, or all of the above. Okay, when they're referring to diamonds, it's not the diamonds that you have, right? The diamonds they're referring to could be in the land. Whatever is in the land, Let me just give you a simple clue. If anything that is expensive, diamond, gold, minerals, oil, whatever they have underneath the ground, that's not belonging to you. It belongs to the government. And I think I taught you that before, right? So nothing expensive. Life insurance, that comes with the person. So he's not attached to the land. He's movable, okay? So the only thing that we have in here is the airspace rights, okay? That's the only one. Next one. A real estate appraiser would not value. So if I was the appraiser and I come and look at your property, what's one thing I'm not going to look for, okay? Let's look at the airspace. Would I look for that as an appraisal for your property? Yes, I would. They ask which one is not. So option 2 is out. Okay, a fee simple interest. Would I look at that? Yeah, that is your legal rights of ownership. So I'm definitely going to look at this too. So those two definitely out. But now the problem that a lot of our students have is between option 1 and option 3. You have to think what comes with the land and what does not come with the land. Okay, an existing rental agreement of the warehouse, a rental agreement. It's a lease of the property, right? It comes with the land. That lease could be for 10, 20 years. So it stays with the land. But look at this. Even if there's a legal interest in cattle. What is cattle? Okay, what is cattle? Cattle is chattel. Right? Cattle is movable. You can cut it, you can eat it. Sorry, but that's what cattle, right? Cattle is movable. And if you sell the property, it doesn't mean it comes with the cattle because you can take the cattle with you. It's like a car, right? If you sell the car, you know how they advertise houses and sometimes they put these expensive cars in front of it? You know, that car does not come with the house. You know that, right? Same thing with the cattle. So cattle is movable. So for that reason, right, option 3 becomes a false statement because it's movable. It's not attached to the land, and that's why it has no value to the appraiser whatsoever. Okay, question 16. Let's see if you can find the definition. The subject of the appraisal is, what's that keyword that you're looking for? Okay, you're looking for the keyword that talks about legal rights, the value of the legal rights of the ownership vested in a specific piece of real estate, right? So that's what the subject of appraisal is based on all of the legal rights. Good job. So now we're going to talk about the factors affecting the value. So basically, you have to know the short-term trends and the long-term trends, right? So basically, the things that will affect your property value in the long term or the short term. There's a lot of different long-term trends in here, like the age composition. So what does that mean? That means, you know how we have baby boomers that are dying out right now, right? So it took a long time before that will affect the property values, right? Because now we have a lot of them dying and the properties are going on the market, right? So that's something to do with the age, right? Government programs that might affect the real estate, that takes a long time before it gets into effect, right? Supply and cost of raw materials, ship and government composition. For the exam, I say just cross it off. Just cross it off. Know those short-term trends, because if you know those two, then you're good to go, okay? The short-term trends is what affected property value on a short term, not a long term. It doesn't take years to affect it, but it affects pretty fast. And that's exactly what's happening with our market at this point. Consumer pessimism and optimism. So their opinions, right? So people opinions. Oh, I think the market is crashing. Let's just sell it. And the whole thing in the same way. And all the news right now, whatever they're talking about, right? It all affects the property value. The next month might be completely opposite story. And they talk about, oh, you have to get into the market now. It's booming. And everybody's starts buying the property, right? So it's kind of like those things affect people's decisions when it comes to buying and selling, but it does not affect the market for too long. And the other thing is what's happening with us right now too is the interest rates. When the banks change the rates, what happens then? Then suddenly everybody panics and they start buying for how long? Just for a little bit, but then they still have to sell and they still have to buy their family expanding, right? So these things do not affect the property value for too long. Yes, it might affect for a few months, maybe a year. It says, okay, the rates are too high, but you'll figure your things out and you'll still have to buy something or sell something, right? So know the short-term trends. Okay, question 17. Which of the following factors is most likely to affect the value of the residential property in the short run? Right? Government stuff, age composition, that's long-term. It takes forever to affect the property values, but which one, right? The consumer opinions, what people think, what comes on TV, what comes in the news, sometimes it affects people's opinions, right? And because of that, they buy, sell, or don't do nothing. Okay, so factors affecting the property value. So we have all different factors that can affect the property values. Now, we talked about externalities. So when I say externality, that's when your house is immobile, and all of those parts, hospitals, schools, they affect the property value. And why did we call them externalities? Because they are physically right next to your location, right? So that's why they are affecting. But this is just a factor. So when there's unemployment happens, I don't know, there's war somewhere. So those things might affect us also, but they're not an externality, right? It's other factors that affect the property value. So physical, of course, what affecting the value is your location, because if you can move it, then yes. But if you cannot move it, then that's because of the location the house doesn't sell or sells, right? Climate, community factors, there's transportation, schools available in the area, that's physical, something that's in that area that might affect the property value. Economic, right? So when the interest rates are going up and down in the banks, that's affecting us economically, right? Unemployment rates, when there's not enough jobs in here, right? All the things, taxes, when they increase the gas taxes or whatever, right? It can affect us all in all different ways. Political, government, right? So when they change the bylaws, when they do any regulations, right? Health measures, rent controls, all the things that's happening. Right now, they removed from 2020, actually, November 2020, they removed the fixed tenancy agreements now, right? So that affects a lot of landlords and say, I don't want to rent anymore. And that's why we have such a shortage of rentals now, because of those new government things that they came up with, right? So my question is, can the advertisement affect the property value? If one agent spends so much money on the ads and says, hey, I'm going to spend a lot of money and we'll advertise the property, will be all over social media. Because of that, can that affect the property value and sell for more than it should be? Of course it could, right? And that's why a lot of agents like to advertise things, because if one property is not advertised and the other one is, of course the one that has advertising will sell quicker, maybe even for more. Relationship between the parties to the sale. So you remember what I told you? if it's my mom who's buying my property, it's not an arm's length transaction, and I'm probably not going to sell it for as much as I could have sold it. So if it's between related parties, you cannot use that as an appraisal. You cannot use it for the appraisal because you know that is not a true market value, right? Time allowed for sale. So some people need to be moved fast, or they got a job somewhere else. That time pressure, can that affect the property value? Of course you can, right? Then those people are probably going to sell for less because they're under pressure to sell it, right? So those kind of things will affect it. But then we have a special purchaser. Sometimes you'll have a question in the exam when they will talk with the special purchaser and say, who is that special guy? Who is that special purchaser that comes and buys your property? Is he a celebrity? No. So special purchaser is somebody, it's usually a very regular person, but somebody who really, really, really wants it, right? So for example, one of the students brought the question, says that there was 2 stores right next to each other, and the owner wanted to expand his store and says, oh, I can't wait to expand it. And now suddenly a store next door went for sale, okay? Because he wanted to expand his store, do you think he'll pay more or less for the other property? Especially when it comes to bidding offers, he'll pay more, right? So usually special purchases sometimes will pay more, but because that's what they really want, right? It's because of their personal values. Okay. So it's not about the person, it's about the property itself, right? And usually greatly extend the range of the possible bids. So he will probably pay more just because that's what he really wants. So yeah, question 18. So the appraiser has been asked to provide an estimate of the market value of the farmhouse and the surrounding property. Which of the following statements would not affect the estimate of the market value? So they're looking for that market value, and they say would not affect that value estimate, right? So one of the pastures of the property has been leased for 2 years. Now, if there's a lease to the property, right, would that affect the property value? Yes, it could, because it's attached to the land, right? That lease is not going anywhere for the next 2 years, so that will affect the property value. Maybe it'll sell for more because of that, right? Because somebody's already giving you profits. So who knows? But that one will affect because it comes with the land. The owner of the farmhouse is anxious to move and would like to sell as soon as possible. Now, just because he's anxious to move, right, his personal interest or his personal motivation, would that affect the market value? You see what they're looking for? They're looking for the market value. It will not affect because that's his personal thing. Yes, it will affect the price. He probably will sell it for less because he urgently wants to move it, but it will not, as an appraiser, I'm not going to look at his personal motivations. Where does he want to go? What does he want to do? It's not going to affect the market value of the property, basically, right? Because it's not about people, his financial situation, or where does he want to move to, right? All the other ones will affect it. The farmhouse and its surrounding property are located between the main road and the next door neighbor's property. Therefore, the neighbors gets to benefit access to his house by means of the road that runs through the farmhouse property. So if somebody has an easement on your land, those easements also going to affect the property values, and that will affect the market value of the property. And then before, ABC Finance Company recently loaned some money and below market interest rates to the owners of the farmhouse and secured the debt with a mortgage on the farmhouse. Because the mortgage is attached to the land, is not attached to a person, right? For that reason, it will affect the market value too. But a person is movable, his financial situation or his motivation, it's not going to affect the market value. Okay. Now this is a good question. Question 19 talks about the special purchaser, and I do want you to look at all 4 options in here and find me the best. Who do you think will be that special purchaser in here? Okay. The clue is don't look for famous people. On the exam is always the regular guy, but want something specific, right? Option 1. A former Prime Minister of Canada who is interested in purchasing a residential property is an upper middle class neighborhood. Just because he's a Prime Minister doesn't mean that he becomes a special purchaser. Nobody cares, okay? Not about famous people, so we don't care about him. A famous Canadian painter who is in order to receive creative inspiration feels like he must purchase a more abundant church he has located deep in the woods. Now that sounds really, really specific and special, but let's read more options. A retail merchant who wants to purchase a store with a large window display along the main street in the southern BC. Is he very specific in this case too? Right, store with a large windows display along the main street, south and east. So he's very specific here too. So it's between option 2 and 3. Let's look at option 4. A professional football player who wants to purchase an apartment in the investment, his stable income. So football players, prime ministers, out. Okay, it's not about them. And even between option 2 and option 3, what will help you is choose the regular person. I know it sounds funny, but they want that retail merchant. They want somebody who wants very specific. So if you want those large windows displays along the main street, that's more specific than this guy. Okay, it's hard to explain why, but you have to choose a better option. What they're aiming for is for this regular guy, not the famous guy. Okay, question 20. 2 neighbors, we have Miss Finch and Mr. Falcon, each sold their homes last week. Miss Finch sold her house for $150, and Mr. Falcon sold it for $132. So he sold it for less. Okay. And he cannot understand why his house sold for less, and he's asking you for the advice. Which of the following accounts could account for the difference in selling price? So what we're looking for is those factors that can affect the sale price in here. So Miss Finch had already purchased another home and needed to sell his or her this home already. So she sold for more, and option 1 says because she already purchased another home, and that's why she sold this home faster, right? If somebody has an urgency, they usually don't sell for more. They usually sell for less because they have to sell it now, right? And for that reason, they might accept lower price because they have to move. So because she already purchased another home, it will motivate you to sell for less, not for more. For that reason, that's not the answer. The Mr. Falcon had already purchased another home and needed to sell his home. Now that becomes more true statement because he sold for less. And usually because he needs to move somewhere else, and he says, look, I already bought it and I have 2 mortgages, I have to sell this one, so he will sell it for less, right? That urgency sometimes makes us sell things for less. For that reason, option 2 is what they're looking for. Option 3 is not true because it says Miss Falcon supplied a vendor take-back mortgage of 30% while the current market rate is 16. So I'll keep it simple for you at this point. This will not affect the property values. Okay, so don't look for this as any of the answers when it comes to why one person sold for more than the other one. I'll show you one question just about that specifically, but in this kind of question, just ignore this vendor take back mortgage stuff, interest rates, and all of the above. So option 2 is what they're aiming for. Question 21. Same thing, two identical houses located next door to one another in the same neighborhood sells with 1 week of each other. So Miss Brown sells her house for $112,000, and Mr. Fisher sells only for $100,000. What are they looking for? They see why is one sold for less and why sold for more, right? Option 1, the listing brokerage representing Ms. Brown spends an extraordinary amount of the money towards the advertisement. So she sold for more and he spent a lot of money on the ads. That sounds like a true statement, right? So that's what happens when you spend money on the advertisement. And it says Ms. Brown was promoted to a new position and she had to move, right? She will sell, because of that, she will sell for less. But in this case, she sold for more, so that means we're looking for that option number 1. How's it so far? I know it's a lot of information, but you can always pause me or you can always watch Melanie's videos, and have different explanations. Question 22. All other things being equal, a selling price less than the market value of the property is most likely to be obtained in the sale when is what? Okay, so selling price less than the market value. So why do we sell it for less? Okay, the real estate price are increasing very quickly. The seller is not in a hurry to sell. So when the seller is not in a hurry to sell, he usually doesn't sell it for less. He usually sells it for more because he's not in a hurry. He can wait. He'll get his price. So that's not what we sell for less. The buyer is in a hurry to buy. That doesn't mean that he's gonna pay less. He's probably going to buy more because he's in a hurry to buy, right? The property has been exposed to the market for more than 2 months. It doesn't mean the property is going to sell for less. So why does the property sell for less? It's because of this, okay? The real estate prices are going too fast. So if the market right now, that's again what's happening right now in the world, especially like here too, right? Last year, if you look at the prices, we're almost half of what it is now, right? So the prices are, of course, we have inflation happening too, but the prices are increasing so quickly. And you thought that when you sold your house 2 months ago, you sold at a good price, and now you look at the houses that's selling now, and you're like, holy shit, did I sell for way less than I supposed to? No, but because the price is increasing so quickly, and that's why sometimes we think we sold it for less, right? Good job. Finally, we're going to get to the appraisal methods. Now, so this is where you have to kind of get the foundation. This is an appraisal introduction. So we're introducing all of these methods for you. And for my real estate people, we're going to get more into details later. And mortgage people, we're going to get into more things. But for most other people, like charter and property management, you guys just have to know the foundational stuff. Okay, so you have to know different method that we use when it comes to appraisals. Okay, the most common method, the one that we use the most, is called the comparative method. The comparative or the comparison, they can call it different names, but it means the same thing. What is comparative or what is comparison stands for? If I want to know what your subject property is worth, then what do? I take your property and I will compare it to the recently what? Sold properties. I'm not the one that's on the market now, but recently sold ones. Right? Now, why would I use comparative method here? Because there's enough information. There's enough data in this area specifically. So I have enough comparables that are similar to my subject property. So if I have enough comparable information, then I will use this method. Right? It's used for 2 things, right? It's used for residential property and it's used for the empty lots. So again, when do I use this comparative method? When I have enough comparables that recently sold ones, right? Usually if you live in the city, then you have enough comparables to compare it to, right? So residential houses, empty lots is what I'm going to use this method for. We call it 2 different names. It means the exact same thing, okay? So it relies on the market evidence from the similar property. So what does that mean? Similar in respect to my property. Nothing is exactly the same, okay? But they're similar. For that reason, I can use them, right, as a comparative, right? And we will be using the principle of substitution. We're not teaching you this in this chapter, but we'll teach you in the next coming out chapters, right? Principle of substitution stands for that I'm going to be using those recently sold properties, compare them, and I will substitute. So basically, if one has 2 bedrooms, one has 3 bedrooms, then I will do that substitution there. That's why it's based on principle of substitution, when I can have the rights to compare the property one to another ones. Reflects the market behavior and requires a minimum of subjective opinion from the appraiser. Can you highlight this? It requires a minimum subjective opinion from the appraiser. So what are they trying to tell you? Do you have to hire the appraiser to do appraisal on the property? Or can you do your own informal appraisal? Can you kind of look at other recently sold ones and compare yourself and figure out how much the property should be going for? Right? So we don't hire the appraisers for this method because we have enough information. We have enough lots, we have enough houses to compare things to each other, right? And buyers and sellers are well informed about the current sales transaction. So you have to understand that, yes, buyers are very smart these days. They also look for everything that's sold and what comes up in the market. So, people have enough information in order for them to use this method. Residential MLS, I just wanted to show you this. So when we're going to pull up, so when you want to sell the houses, right? Or if you want to buy a house, if you pull up the search, you can find all the residential houses that are detached, attached, and you also can find the land. And that's why we use the land method, right? So if it's just the lot that they're selling, we're still going to use the comparative method. Why? Because we have enough information for that too, right? That was just to show you. Okay, so the second method we're going to use is called the cost method. The cost. Why do they call it cost? Comparative makes sense because you compare that to the other properties, recently sold ones, right? But the cost method is to look, what if my client asked me to sell that church? And I have no clue. I have nothing to compare that church to. It's not like I have a lot of churches in here. And if I go back on the MLS system in here, can I find any churches in here? Probably not, right? So that's something that is unique. So anything that is unique, you're going to be using that cost method, okay? Something that has nothing to compare to. So if you start with this church and says, look, what do I do with this church now? I have nothing to compare it to, so I will look at the cost of the building, and I'm going to look at the cost of the land. You see what I'm trying to do here? Now, is that the accurate method? Is that the method that will be used the most? So an example, if you ask you which one is the most exact method, or which one do we use the most, what do you say? Not this. You're going to say, sorry, you're going to use the comparative method. That is the most used method. Why? Because we have a lot of comparables. But if you say which one is the most inexact, which one is the most less used than anything else, you'll say it's the cost method. Why? Because it's not a true value. It's not like you can predict how much the property will sell for, but the only thing you can play with at this point is just the cost of the land and the cost of the building, right? You'll figure out, you'll minus depreciation out of the building, you'll find out how much you think the property could be worth, but does it mean that it's going to sell for that price? No, it can sell for more, it can sell for less, right? So that's why it's called the cost method, because the only thing you can look at, you can only look at the cost of the building itself and the land, right? And that's kind of, it's not an MLS, it's not an income property, right? So church doesn't really produces income in here, right? It's not an investment property, so for that reason, you're going to use this cost method for it. Based on the replacement cost, that means the cost of the building and the cost of the land, right? For the exams, if they'll ask you, what do you use for this method? It could be any type of churches. Now, what if they say, oh, it's a contemporary style of church? Does it matter? Don't care, right? Church is a church, right? Temple is a temple, right? Any type of mills. On example, you do pulp mill, windmill, whatever that mill is. All mills also, even though you think it could be a producing, but it's not an investment property, so you have to use the cost method for this. And concrete plant. On example, start putting this one out there and says, what method would you use for this? Same idea, right? You're going to use the cost method. Nothing to compare it to, right? Concrete plant, all the mills, churches, temples. Okay, the next method is the income method. So the income method is the one that produces you income. That is your investment property. And this is usually for rental or the commercial buildings. So if your client comes and says, look, I want to sell my commercial building, would you sell it for me? How much do you think it's worth? Would you use the comparative method? No. Would you use the cost method? No, because this property produces income, clearly. For that reason, you're going to look at the rate of return. You see, investors don't want to, you're not just going to compare it to anything else. If anybody else wants to buy this property, they're going to ask you, so how much this property produces in income? You see, they have totally different questions here. So we look at the rate of the return in here. We don't care how old is the building. So we don't look at depreciation of the building. This is the only method that does not use depreciation at all. We don't care. Because all we care about is how much is the cash flow. How much money would I put in my pocket at the end of the day? So examples of the income method, warehouses, leasehold interest, apartment buildings, right? So anything that deals with income producing and rental, but not single family residence. Single family residence will be under which method? Under the comparative method. Good. Okay, so that was your income method, right? And then we have the residual method. Residual. Now, sometimes they call it hybrid method, which means the same thing, right? So residual and hybrid method. So this is the method you will be using for something that does not produces, something that is not at its highest and best use, okay? I had to find those pictures for you. That is in Vancouver. We have, in the middle of downtown, we have a few small detached homes in there. And if you look at them, it says, wow, that's crazy. If I buy this lot and if I had no restrictions on zoning, or if that was not a heritage building, do you think I would keep that building? Or do you think I would use that lot and build something better than that? So those houses, we call them latent value properties. Latent value. Latent value means not at its highest and best use, right? It's opposite from this. So it means it's not producing the best, like it's not in the best use right now. So if I bought this lot and if I had no restrictions, I would probably take that building off and I would build a high rise because I will make so much more money from that because it has so much air estate that could be usable, right? So residual method, or I'll say it again, the hybrid method, which means exact same thing, right? This is the method we use for properties that do not possess the best and highest use. Something that possesses latent value, right? Do not at its highest and best use, and it's good for what? It's good for the redevelopment. So this is the properties that you want to change, right? You don't want to keep them the same things, right? High value may result through the change of use. So if you find a better use for this property, then of course you're going to make more money from this. Highest and best use. So opposite from the latent value. Now on the exam, they start asking this as a definition. So they will ask you highest and best use is what? Okay, is the use of land which will provide the maximum net return during the foreseeable future. So that's highest and best use, that's what we want. It will produce you the maximum return. Latent value is opposite. It does not produce what you want, right? Not at its best use. Question 23. In the contents of appraisal, which of the following properties is most likely to possess the latent value? Okay, look at all of them. This is a tricky one, but which one is more not at its highest and best use? A 30-acre dairy farm in the agricultural land reserve. Okay, dairy, agricultural, sounds pretty okay to me. A recently constructed duplex unit in a single-family residential area of the city. So they actually put 2 units in a single-family. They're probably using more money. They're making more money here now than before. A bicycle store that is built on the land zone for the commercial use. That sounds pretty good to me, right? And a farmhouse suited on the land zone for the commercial use. So on the commercial use, you probably can make more money by putting the commercial units in there instead of the farmhouse. So for that reason, that's probably the most latent value property out of all of them. Right? The other one seems to me more like, oh, it's okay, and this one will actually make more money because it has a duplex in a single family. I don't even know if they're allowed to do that, but it's definitely not a latent value stuff. But this one could be changed to a commercial use, so they could make more money from that. Okay, question 24. Now, this question, you have 4 different options in here. You have A, B, C, and D. You have different properties in there, and you have to figure out which one is what. Which one is a comparative method, which one is a residual, which one is the income method, right? So you have to figure that out. So anything to do with mills, pulp mill, windmill, churches, concrete plant, right? I don't care where they are, in Squamish or Vancouver. So what is that? If I look at option A and it says it's a comparison, okay, or A says cost, or A says income, or the cost, which one is the mill? And in mill of the churches, that's your cost. Why? Because there's nothing to compare to. That is a unique property. So I know for that reason that I can cross off option 1 and option 3 because A has to be a cost. And right now it's between option 2 and option 4. Okay? Market comparison and income, A does not belong to, right? So for that reason, I kept 2 and 4. Let's continue. A small single family house in the central business district of Vancouver. Now that sounds like a single family house, but there is something in there. So my question is this: is that a comparative or the comparison method, or is that a residual method? You tell me. If I just say single family house in Vancouver, then that would be a comparison method. But if I say it's in the middle of the business district, that's more of a, not this, but a residual method, right? Residual is something that it's not that it's highest and best use. That little house that I showed you in the middle of downtown, right? You probably wanted to redevelop that. So for that reason, that's a tricky one. And if you're not really sure about something, then you would skip it and you would go for the next one. Every time when they say multi-units apartment, if they say multi-units, think of it as income, okay? It's that rental is the income commercial property. So if I was not sure about option B, I would look at option C, and my C has to be an income. And you see how here it says residual? So I would still choose option number 4 because C is a true statement. Right, C is the income method, and D is a residential condominium. So if it's just one condo, that's your comparison method, right? So keep it simple for yourself. So that should be option number 4. So that's it. We finished this chapter. I know it had a lot of information, but just know that it's pretty heavy on the exam. It does have a lot of questions, and when you go for the real exam, you'll see this. Anyways, do your quizzes. If you need more information, if you want to get more into details, then you watch Melanie's video, same chapter, but Melanie's video, she goes more into details and explain you why this and why that. Sometimes it's good to listen to 2 different instructors. And I will see you in the next video.